Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian and along with Chris, I am co-founder at Ruby Reese, a dog care brand from Cork in Ireland, providing a range of top quality dog products for your pet. We have a focus on clean and short ingredients lists, and our nutritional supplements, treats and home grooming products are made to suit even dogs with lots of sensitivities. We actually set up the whole brand because our own dog Ruby has lots of sensitivities. Both founders, Chris and I, believe in lifelong learning and also knowledge sharing, and this podcast is an opportunity for us to learn as much as we can about our beloved pet dogs, and are delighted for lots of you to come along for the journey and learn with us. So we don't actually claim to be absolute experts, but we are so humbled by the guests that come on and join this podcast and share such valuable information with us all. So if you would be so kind, we would appreciate if you can follow or subscribe this podcast wherever you listen to it. And there might also be a chance to give the podcast a star rating, which would be great as well. So this week we are tackling a really important but also an emotionally charged one, because we will be speaking with the amazing Louise Griffey, who is a grief recovery specialist and runs Light After Loss. Louise and I had a great chat all about grieving the loss of a pet, and we've tried to approach this topic with openness, compassion, and also a bit of vulnerability. But it's also worth advising people to listen to this one when they feel ready for it, and also know that it's possible, and it's totally okay to pause and go back to the chat at any point as well. So without further ado, I am delighted to welcome you now to listen to the chat that I had with Louise. Hello, Louise. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Killian. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Would you do us the pleasure of introducing yourself?
Of course. My name is Louise Griffey and I am the founder of Light After Loss. And what that is I specialise in helping people through pet loss. I'm a certified grief recovery specialist. So that's the quick sum up of what I do.
Thank you very much. And maybe you could start off very basic and let us know what actually is grief.
So basically, grief is kind of, there's lots of kind of definitions out there of grief, but it's emotional pain, really, what it is. And a lot of people kind of ask what it is, but it's that emotional pain that's built up from a loss, and it can be that conflicting feeling as well from a loss. There's lots and lots of definitions, but instead of getting into the real nitty gritty of it, I like to say that it's really painful emotional pain, in short, and that's what a lot of people will kind of agree with and kind of feel as well when I ask them to kind of describe what grief is, in short, anyway.
Mm-hmm. And so we're talking about grief when it comes to losing a pet. How does the grief of losing a pet compare to losing a human?
I'm actually really glad that you asked this question, because I was speaking about this on an episode recently, and the word compare, I've such a problem with it because comparison is so damaging. And I think that a lot of people get that kind of reaction and comments from others saying, well, it's not like you've lost a human in your life, it's just a pet. So it's just a cat, it's just a dog, whatever that animal is that was part of your life. And I think, well, for me personally, I can speak for myself right now, and I don't know about you, Killian, you might share how you feel about it, but for me, I've never experienced as much pain then losing both of my dogs. Both of my dogs died within a short space of time of each other, and that was worse than any other loss that I had ever experienced in my life. And that's just for me personally. And many people that I kind of speak with, they often say the same. They might say a parent died years ago, and this is totally different. This is way more intense. And so that's why comparison can be really damaging, because there's no help in comparing. It's not helpful, and I don't see the point in it as such, because every relationship is individual, and every relationship has a certain amount of intensity and has brought a certain amount of joy, sadness, all of the emotions to our lives. So comparing it is like pointless.
It's huge. And and I think from my perspective, I can totally agree with you there. You know, certain pets take, you know, they're really integrated into your routine. They're part of your daily life. They bring you so much joy. I'm thinking about our little Ruby at the moment, but not just Ruby, but I grew up with St. Bernards, and you know, all through my life I've had the pleasure of having them in my life, and it's so upsetting when you lose them. And I think there's no it makes no difference whether you're a child or whether you're an adult. I think you can have an incredible bond with a pet. And in my own experience, obviously dogs. And I think that, like you say, it's always individual, because each relationship is individual, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. And like you say, that bond is just, it's that connection and bond. Like, I mean, and I know a lot of people talk about unconditional love, and that's really what it is, because there aren't conditions attached to the love that, say, Ruby gives you, and what you've experienced before with previous dogs. And it's the same for my two dogs. Like, it's just that there's no judgment and there's no criticism that often we get from family members or friends about something in our life. And there's always kind of conditions usually attached to that, but the kind of love that we receive from animals is just, you know, it's undescribable, really, you know.
And I suppose, like, in a lot of ways, most of the listeners here will resonate. This will resonate with that. I suppose our dogs are our dependents as well. They, you know, there might be dogs out there that are wild dogs, or that kind of fend for themselves in certain ways. But I think anyone listening into this is likely to have more of an experience that they're particularly their dog, but any pet is going to be quite dependent on them. So the level of care and the level of attention that we give them, or should be giving them, will potentially then, you know, even strengthen our bonds with our pets, and you know, potentially make us grieve even more when they're lost then. And I wonder, you mentioned as well that some people don't understand when pets are lost. Like, why do some people find it so difficult to understand the depth of grief that comes with losing a pet?
I think we definitely kind of touched on it in the previous question, but it's definitely a case of not everybody in life has created a connection and a bond and a relationship like us pet parents that have done before. And I think that it's really, really difficult for those people who haven't to get a grasp, to get it, to understand. And look, hands up, that's okay. That is okay. And I'm not going to say anything bad about that, because they've never experienced that. And I feel like, oh, I wish you could have. That's how I feel for those people. I wish you could have just experienced a relationship. And even for the moment, I'm fostering greyhounds with my partner at the moment, and they're kind of, you know, 2 to 3 months here and there. And the incredible relationship that you can build up with a dog in that short space of time. Like, we were bawling when they leave to go to their new homes. And I just think that that's evidence in itself that the relationship can form. Like, even though it might be so unexpected, I might say to myself, no, I'm going to, like, keep focused on, this, but I just melt. It just happens, like just a bond forms and the connection forms. And I think if people don't have that in their life and they're not, they don't have any contact with pets, or, there's a lot of, like, my dad, he was a farmer and I grew up in a farm, and it's totally different, farm
Yeah.
animals, domestic, pets living in a home, it's completely different. So that's a long way of answering your question, but I think that's definitely the main reason, really. And that can then be really difficult for the people that are going through the grief, because they feel
Hmm.
so misunderstood, and they feel like, why can't these people see that my pet was so important to me? Because it's just because they've never felt that connection. They have nothing to relate it to, really. And that's why it's really, really challenging for people then that are going through the grief of pet loss.
Yeah. Yeah. And who should we be speaking with when we're grieving a pet?
Well, I don't really like the word should, but it's up to everybody as such. It's really individual, but I think that for me, and my advice would be, if you have somebody close, like if you assess your inner circle and you have somebody, and I like to often use the word a safe person in your life, or whether there's safe people, there might be a couple, um, that maybe, they've had relationships with pets, they've lived with pets, they've had bonds with pets. Maybe they might be a safe person to open up to share how you're feeling with. And it's okay to want to talk about your pet, and a lot of people just shut that down and lock it away and suppress it and push it down. But if talking is good and writing is good, get your journal out and write, just get everything out. And if it's something that you feel you don't have anyone safe in your inner circle, it's to look maybe outwards. It's to maybe find somebody that's specialising in pet loss, a therapist, a counsellor, grief recovery therapist, whoever is kind of available, or whoever kind of comes into your path, is kind of more what I like to say. Because if we're looking for support and something just kind of crops up and pops up, then kind of go with your intuition, go with your gut, and see what feels right for you support wise, whether that's joining a Facebook group, a pet loss Facebook group, whether that's going to in-person sessions to help to speak about these things. There are lots of options available to help with this now. It's just a matter of searching for it, and there wasn't a lot up until a couple of years ago. So it's really, really amazing that there's so many people out there offering support now to people who really need it, going through this.
Definitely. And I suppose it sounds like, finding a safe space to be vulnerable in is really the key there, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because vulnerability is so scary for many of us.
Hmm.
And even for me still, it can be. But there is healing in being vulnerable. And I often say that. And there is growth in opening up about how you really feel. And whether that's on Zoom with a group of people, or whether that's one-to-one with somebody that you trust and feel safe with, you're healing that wound, that grief
Hmm.
wound that's on our heart. And when it's significant, and it's really painful, and it needs to be felt, it needs to be heard and seen. And I think that's what's really important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about opening up. What are some of the common emotions that people might experience when grieving the loss of a pet?
Well, there's with speaking about emotions, there's a full roller coaster of them. Um, and there are other kind of responses that people might feel as well. But emotions wise, it can be anything from anger to guilt to sadness to panic to, it just goes like a wave, and these can crop up at any stage, usually at the most inconvenient times, as many would tell me on sessions, maybe during work, maybe when you're in the middle of Tesco shopping, you know, and that's just what grief is. It demands to be felt at the most inappropriate times, unfortunately. But other kind of common responses would be a huge decrease in concentration. So that is, like, just everybody that I speak to feels that way. Like, for example, if you left the kitchen to go upstairs for something and you just got upstairs and you can't remember what you went for, like that, and that never happened to you before, and it just happens all the time. That's just one example, but it's just concentrating in work, concentrating in daily tasks, driving in your car, getting lost. Where was I going to? This is huge. This is definitely a response, a symptom of grief. Also, sleep disturbances, change in appetite, just change in mood, not wanting to be social, wanting to often just hide away and just want to protect ourselves because we're in deep pain. And what this is it's invisible to others. And that's what's so difficult about this. You need to put this mask on to go to work. And then when you get home, and this has happened to me, I just collapse and I want to let all my emotion out because I've been holding it in all day long. And that is absolutely excruciatingly exhausting, I will tell you. Mm-hmm. And I know that others listening may be feeling that way as well, that it is so exhausting. It's an emotional roller coaster. So there are other kind of responses and symptoms that, if grief is not felt and it gets complicated and it goes on a really prolonged period of time, you know, it can affect our digestive system. We can get illnesses. We can start seeing, like, for myself, I can speak for myself. I experienced really severe vertigo attacks, migraines, and this happened for months, and they were debilitating. And I never put the link together. Mm-hmm. And then when I started to get help and seek support, they just started to dissipate. And a lot of people don't know that there's a huge link to physical health and emotional health. Like, they are intertwined, because your body is trying to tell you a lot of things. Now, I'm not a doctor, but if you are experiencing a lot of physical reactions and responses, a trip to the doctor is no harm as well, to get checked out. And I often say that to people when they're getting ill out of nowhere and they haven't been before the loss. So that is just something to keep in the back of your mind. But there are lots more, but there's only to touch on some of them, really.
And that's it. There are a lot of emotions that you can go through, and a lot of feelings and situations that you might be in. But I suppose it's important for people to know as well that no matter what your individual process is, it's all valid, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all valid, and it's all individual and unique. There is no set timeline to grief, and that is the thing. It's not linear. It doesn't go in a straight line. For pet loss, a lot of people say, how long is this going to last? I asked myself that question for a couple of years when I was going through it, and when I refused to process it or feel it. And I was like, surely it just goes away in time, and it just will. But that's not how it works. There isn't a set timeline, and there isn't a set number of weeks, months or years. But what can help with the emotional pain is actually sitting with the grief and getting support if you need it, or learning skills. Online, we can learn so much stuff online for free. How to process pain, emotional pain, and really helpful things to do in order to do that, really.
While we were preparing for this talk, you mentioned as well that a lot of people experience guilt when they're experiencing grief. Why might that be the case?
I think that there's so much guilt attached to pet loss. in some cases, in some situations, not all, of course, but a huge amount of people that I speak to, yes, because the whole area of euthanasia is something that is so unnatural to us. To have to end a life of this gorgeous being that's lived with us for however long, and that we can't give them that choice, that we're making that choice for them, even though it comes from the best place in our heart, and whatever the situation is that's happening to lead to that, for the welfare of the animal and so on. There's so many different reasons that I can't get into now, but that's predominantly where the guilt comes from. And it's like, I did that. I ended my pet's life. And a lot of people get stuck in that and stay in that. And they find it really difficult to see around that, and the reasons leading up to it, the ethical reasons, the welfare, the compassionate reasons, the kindness that's in it. And it's a really, really conflicting subject to talk about. And of course, there's just guilt that then eats us away afterwards for having to make those decisions, because sometimes we feel, I shouldn't have delayed that decision. I wanted more time with my pet. I was feeling selfish, and we overthink everything in that scenario. And we're really, really hard on ourselves, and we feel a lot of guilt. But if we just bring it back to complete basics and think of the word guilt as it is in the dictionary, like in the dictionary is to inflict harm on someone. You know what I mean? And that's not, if I ask that question to people that I speak with, to clients, and I say, did you mean to inflict harm? They're like, no, of course I didn't. Because that's the meaning of guilt. And I know that, I think that bringing it back to basics really, really helps people, and to reframe the word, what might feel better, what might be a better way to describe how you're feeling. And a lot of the time, a lot of people come to the word regret. Mm-hmm. There's a regret there about how everything happened. And there's lots of, I wish that things were different, and I regret that happened that way. And there's a lot of that. And there's other words that people can come up with, but I feel that guilt is an unfair description of this pain that people are going through, and it's just, they're being so hard on themselves, and that they're feeling guilty, because we love our pets with every inch of our soul, and we would do anything for them, and we did what we feel was best in the information, the knowledge, and in the time that we had, and taking in the whole situation. And we made decisions that we felt were best for our pet. And that's all that our pets ever want. We love them till the bitter end, and we would never wish harm on them. I don't believe anybody listening to this podcast would kind of disagree with that. And that's why I feel that guilt is such a difficult emotion for people to deal with, to process, to even challenge, really, in their mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it is a good reminder to be a little bit kinder to ourselves and the decisions that we're forced to make anyway. So we are only human. But I suppose coping with these feelings as well, it's really important. So how can pet owners cope with feelings of guilt or regret after the loss of their pet then?
I think that coping with the guilt is, if people are finding that this is consuming them and all consuming them, like on a daily basis, the guilt, it is reaching for support would be an amazing thing to do if this is getting to be prolonged. And a lot of people use the word tormented and cannot stop thinking about it, constant feeling of grief. And then grief and guilt, and then that leading to just feelings of hopelessness and deep, deep pain and sadness. And I think that's when people often say that I've hit this stage and I really need some help and I need to talk about it. Because the thing is, Killian, that a lot of people will talk about what happened, the ending of the relationship, the euthanasia appointment, whatever that, however, their pet died, and they will talk about it and re-talk about it and keep rehashing those events. But what isn't happening is the feelings aren't being talked about surrounding the events. So, and that's keeping them stuck in that guilt for a very prolonged period. And if we leave that just in the middle and talk about everything around it, what about the years of the relationship prior to that? What about all of those amazing memories? To try and unlock those is what's really, really difficult for those people. And in order to process the painful guilt is to try and look at the whole relationship as a whole from start to finish, not just the end, not just that, how they died, the circumstances, the events, the euthanasia appointment, not just those. So that's what's really difficult. And the emotions and feelings attached to all aspects of the relationship, ups and downs, because not every relationship is up in our pets. And I've had challenging moments with my two dogs that I often speak about, and ups and downs, and it's really important to talk about those. That's a long-winded answer, but
no,
yeah.
I really, really appreciate it, because there's so much value in what you're saying, and I'm sure it's going to give so many people comfort, and there's going to be people nodding along, definitely, no matter what they're doing, walking around or driving the car, whatever, and definitely saying, oh, that's me in there, and this is my next step even. And like you say, thinking about ways to look at the entire relationship, and not maybe into just around the last 5 minutes of your pet's life, but potentially say years and years of ups and downs, like you say, and everything that's part of life. So on that note, do you think it's important to find ways to honour and remember a pet that has passed away?
Yes, I do. I love that you asked that question, because both of my dogs, it's coming up on 5 years in October now that when they died, and I do things throughout the year to remember them and to just keep that love strong in my heart, because I speak to them on a daily basis. I speak to them when I need help, support, anything like that. And people are like, oh, you're cuckoo. But I'm like, no, this is how I continue the relationship with both of my dogs, which are two separate relationships, but the physical aspect of the relationships have ended, but the spiritual one remains and continues. And like you say, how do you do that? Well, like memorializing them, doing things to remember them. And of course, there's so many things out there now. When I went through pet loss, I buried my two dogs together at home, and now there's so much available. There's cremation, there's jewellery that can hold ashes, there's I don't know, there's the list goes on. There's so much out there to memorialise. But I made a scrapbook of all of the photos, because we don't really have printed photos anymore. Everything is on our phones, our laptops. And I went into a photo shop with the USB, and the whole process was very healing for me, and printed all the photos off, made a collage, trimmed them, cut them, and stuck them in this beautiful book. And I just bring it everywhere with me, and I look at it, and I can have a cry sometimes if I need to, and I write little notes of what I remembered when that photo was taken, and it just helps me to keep connected and unlocks those really happy memories that I never want to forget, because a lot of people say, I'm scared I will forget them and I don't want to. So doing things like this, I do a trip, I go up to Fermanagh, and the Stairway to Heaven is a mountain, and I climb that every year in memory of both of my dogs. And I go to their favourite beach and their anniversary. I do so many different things, and my close friends know about it. Sometimes they join me, sometimes I do it solo. There's so many things that you can do, whoever is listening now, to continue that bond. There's remembrance gardens in the Dogs Trust in Dublin. There's just like planting a tree and putting some of the ashes, when you're planting the tree, into the ground. There's like, the list goes on. You could literally Google it. I'd be here all night, Killian, telling you, but it's just, there's so much that you can do to kind of continue that bond and remember them.
And it's lovely that there are so many options out there as well, with like you say, the grieving process is so individual, and everything that you're feeling is individual to you and that relationship that you're grieving. So it's lovely that there are options there, because some of those ideas might stand out to people as, oh, I'd love to do that I think that would be really, really healing for me, whereas someone else would say, I think that that's not really going to work for me, or it's just not my style of doing things. And I'm sure you hear that all the time, that some people are really for an idea, and then the next person you talk to is just like totally against it. And that's I suppose that what keeps us interesting as individuals as well, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. And like it's just different spectrums. Like, people like to make a little shrine in their home dedicated to their pet, and go to that spot, and then people, often people want to remove everything because that's more healing for them. So it's totally individual, like you say, and that's okay. Whatever feels right for the person is what's right for them, going through this.
And you mentioned that sometimes you have family and friends coming along with you on some of the rituals and memorial journeys that you go on. So how can someone support a friend or family member who's grieving?
I love this question because it's not asked very much, but I think that number one would be like to listen without judgment and criticism, and kind of and even listen without interrupting, because it's okay just to listen and be there for that person and say, I'm here, talk to me, I'm listening. And a simple hug can be huge for someone if they're a hugger, of course. But also, I think I've had experience of this, and I'll say this gently, that a lot of people that have experienced pet loss will say that in the first week or two they've had, lots of visitors and check-ins and texts and phone calls and that kind of thing. But then after that, nothing. And it can be really, really devastating, because grief doesn't go away in 2 weeks, and it can be really painful to kind of see that, oh, they were there for me for the first couple of weeks, and where have they gone now? And I would say, if anybody is wanting to support someone going through pet loss, is to check in on them weeks, months later, even years later, to ask, how are you feeling? If they know if it's coming up to anniversary, even a year on, it can be so painful for people. The first year anniversary, it can be so painful. And even a text can mean the world to someone. It meant the world to me from whoever was in my life at the time, and texting me on the anniversaries, or some people count the months that go by, and that's significant for them. So check in on people, visit people, even weeks, months, years later. It's so easy to put a reminder into our phones now that goes off to remind us of these things. But in the early stages, I would definitely say, if somebody is wondering, what do I do when I've just heard that, say, my friend's pet has passed away? And I would say, just offer help and support, even if that's bringing a cooked meal. I know it sounds kind of silly. the last thing that we think of when we're in the middle of grief is feeding ourselves often. So, you know, bringing someone some food or going getting a few bits in the shop, you know, just the basics, the essentials, and dropping them over. Something like that can be so helpful and so supportive to somebody who's going through this. And remember, like, it's not, sometimes we just don't know what to say. And a lot of us get choked up and I don't have a clue what to say to somebody going through this. But I'm here to tell you it's okay. You can actually say to the person that's grieving the death of their pet, you can actually say the words, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you if you need me. And that's okay.
And it's such an Irish thing, isn't it? Not knowing what to say either. We're so awkward around these things, which is weird because we've got such a culture of wakes and funerals that I don't know how we get over the awkwardness of it. Maybe we secretly love it. I don't know. Yeah. But like you say, there's, I suppose, you never know what to say in that situation, so it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay to even say that. I don't know what to say right now, but I'm here for you. You know, and whether you offer a hug or whether you say, you know, talk to me, how are you feeling? And just, it doesn't have to be complicated. And then there can be a lot of stress and anxiety for the person trying to support someone, but if you offer kindness and compassion, that's enough. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Definitely. And what are some signs that somebody might be struggling to cope with the loss of their pet then?
I touched on it briefly a little bit earlier, but I think that when your daily life is being impacted and you're feeling that there's constant, like, reliving of the moments of what happened, the events of the ending of your pet's life, you're feeling those recurring thoughts, they're kind of tormenting, and it can lead to, I mean, if there was tragic circumstances or traumatic circumstances, PTSD can happen, panic attacks. It did for me, my experience, and it wasn't for a couple of years and until I started to seek help. And I would just advise you to just have some awareness of how you're feeling and in your daily life, and if daily tasks are really, really a struggle for you and you're not feeling that you're kind of processing this or able to speak about it to anybody, that's definitely a sure sign that, you know, it would be good to seek some professional help, some support in this specialised area of pet loss. And I think that could be really helpful for people. So just to kind of know that there is that option there, that you don't have to suffer alone in silence. You don't have to go through this, because it is valid and it is really intense. It's really painful and it's serious, and it can complicate a grief and it can get prolonged. And I think that it's just something to just bear in mind, really.
Definitely, all the resources are so valuable. You know, it's really good that people know that these things exist, and they'll work for some, and they'll be, you know, brilliant outlets for people. Another question for you. Is the stages of grief concept real?
Well, I'm debunking that fact. It's not real. And you probably know this already anyway, Killian, because I think we spoke about this before. But
yeah,
Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she came up with 5 emotional stages. And she did not come up with 5 stages of grief. She came up with 5 emotional stages that a dying person may go through when they're experiencing a terminal illness. Now, this is really different to what a lot of people would wonder or what would have been taught growing up. And I don't even think that this wasn't taught in school. This was just passed down from generation to generation.
I think this was on The Simpsons.
Yeah, maybe it was. Because I was wondering, where did I even hear this? I was just so young. I probably just watching all those episodes over and over on repeat. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this. You're right, I'd say, yeah. But no, it's not true.
Okay.
Like there's
It's a myth.
it's a myth. It's such a huge myth, and it's quite sad because Kubler-Ross put so much work into those emotional stages and writing her book and everything, and it's just been accompanied by such unfortunate collateral damage, really, in my opinion. And it's awful. And even to this day, like, I hear people talking about, I think I'm in like the anger stage or the denial stage, and I'm just like, oh, as in, even when I think of, for example, the denial stage, you know, I was never in denial because
Mm.
I witnessed, the ending of my dog's life. So it's like, for me, I was often wondering, sure, what stage am I in now? And what does the bargaining stage mean? And when do I hit that? And there's all of these questions. And this is so unhelpful when we're just trying to navigate the roller coaster of emotions, the wave of grief coming up in so many different stages of our lives, that we're like, this isn't helpful information and it's not true. So I'm sorry to those who have thought that it is true. It can be really hard to hear that for the first time. I would suggest Googling it. You will find all of the facts, out there about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work that she did, but it's just been twisted down through the years, and it's just been, it's just awful, unfortunate, and it puts people in a position of thinking that there are timelines for grief when there aren't any.
That's true. But I suppose in another sense, because we've already mentioned that all feelings are valid, all emotions are valid, that if you are in an anger stage, that's okay too,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
It's yeah, and that is okay. And it's just the fact of they don't go in that linear,
yeah,
format as such, that, people might say, well, what about my panic or my anxiety? How come anxiety isn't a stage? And so where does that slot in? And so there's lots of questions around it. But yes, like you say, all valid, but not
yes.
do not happen in a stage format or an
Yeah, it's
order
not
or
a sequence.
no.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, and maybe some other grief myths as well that I think might be worthwhile talking about. So, time heals is something that we hear a lot. How do you feel about that?
I don't know why I'm laughing, but it's. I just think, especially here in Ireland, we've heard it for years, and we've had it said to us for lots of things, whether it's a breakup of a romantic relationship or friendship, I don't know, lots and lots of losses, and people, time will heal, you'll get over it, and all of this, and it's such a huge myth, especially around grief, around pet loss. And it's basically giving the message that if we push down and suppress and ignore and keep busy, which is another myth, which I will get to in a moment, that time will eventually heal and time will evaporate my grief. And that's not possible. That just does not happen. And there's been people that will challenge me on it, and I'm open to the challenge, and I often have been, because, I mean, if you get a puncture, are you going to, like, on your way to work, are you going to stand there and stare at it and it'll just heal itself over time? I know it's a silly analogy, but I mean, that's true. And it's
to do something about it. You have to process.
You have to take action. So you have to actually, make some kind of move, make an action towards it. And it's the same for grief, for emotional pain. And this is where we kind of get into the area of unresolved grief, then, is when we believe inherently that time will heal without doing anything, without giving grief its chance to be felt, be seen, be heard, and we just push it down. And what happens then is it accumulates over time with all of the other losses that we experience in our life, whether that's the ending of a career, a loss of health of some kind, breakups, deaths of loved ones. And I will say deaths of loved ones, pets are included in that, because loved ones can be both human and animal. So they will accumulate, and then eventually they will be heard and they will be felt. And whether that's in the form of an illness, whether that's in the form of, it just comes out eventually when people suppress it down enough. But yeah, and keeping busy. I did it myself when my dogs died. All I did was I kept busy, worked. I didn't have any moment in quiet with myself. I wasn't ever sitting alone in feeling the pain or anything. I was just go, exercising, work, just sleep. Like, was not ever giving myself any time to feel it. And that's how keeping busy can be really damaging. And look, a lot of people think that it's a positive thing to say to someone, but I'll just challenge you on that a little bit, that if anyone listening has, said that to someone, just keep busy and it'll get better in time. And wow, a double whammy,
Yeah.
And it's, you don't really hear the help in that. It's not helpful. So just be really mindful the next time it rolls off our tongue. And my God, it does, because it's ingrained in us. These ideas, these sayings, they just are, and we believe that that's the truth. But, instead maybe ask, how are you feeling? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want a hug? Will we go for a walk? So there's so many other helpful, easy sentences to come up with instead of those two,
And the idea of keeping busy, I suppose, as well, you're not really leaving yourself time then to process the grief, right? And
yeah.
Presumably this also kind of touches as well on the idea of alcohol and drugs and all that. Like, that's kind of just presumably blocking out the pain temporarily, but not actually letting you process the grief. Would that be a close to the truth?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, they're numbing behaviours, where we're sedating ourselves, where it is so painful that we will do anything to dumb that down, to silence it, to get rid of it if we can. And like, that can come in the form of so many things, Killian. That can be doom scrolling, it can be constant movie watching, it can be excessive exercise, it can be, like you say, drugs, alcohol, any of those things. There's a long list. And some people might say, oh, but how is watching movies? I was like, well, if you're doing it all the time and it's constant, your brain, like you say, once you switch off the TV at night, do you just feel that moment of, you're like, oh, it's just me, and it's silence. That's the time that you should be given to yourself for grieving, for grief to be felt. We can't grieve when there's everything going on around us in our environment. We have to learn to be quiet with ourselves, in our own safe space, and that can take a long time for people to get to that stage. Yeah.
And you hear a lot about the I suppose escapism as well in the book world, right? When if you speak to people that read a lot of people like kind of really wild books, either wild sci-fi or even the like murder mysteries or whatever. It's all escapism, because they want to get out of their daily lives and move on to something else. But like you say, that's an external stimulus that is not necessarily letting you deal with your grief when now maybe it's not a bad thing either, but if we're doing it excessively and always trying to escape, no matter what route it is,
and it's like you say, and there's that fine balance. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that you just have to sit at home in the quiet every evening and feel it, because that can be exhausting. And but if there's some time that you're dedicating to feeling it and speaking about it or getting support, then that's amazing. But it's like you say, the excessive, if you're working and you're just excessively keeping busy and doing whatever you're doing to numb the pain, but in whatever form that is, that's just suppressing it, and it's not going to help in the long run as such. It's not going to be supportive for you to heal. So yeah, I agree with your points. Really valid. Yeah.
And how can parents or adults help other household pets and children process the grief that they have then when they lose a pet?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a really great question. But if we come to speaking about other pets, if you have a multi-pet household, and often the surviving pet that is left in the household is not forgotten about, but often we kind of feel we're so consumed with the grief for the pet that has died that like having awareness of how the other pet feels, and it's only kind of after a number of weeks that we might see behaviour changes and so on. And I'm not a dog trainer or a behaviourist or anything, but I mean, it can be really devastating for the surviving pet, and they can experience really significant emotional changes, really. And if these prolong and you get really concerned about it, definitely speak to and listen back to some of your other podcasts. You've had amazing trainers and behaviourists on to be able to get support for that. But like, please know that the surviving pet can be more often than not really affected by the death of their friend that's gone. And now they have to learn how to navigate and live their life. And they become quite dependent on the pet that has died. And now they have to learn to navigate this in a whole new life. And it can be really, really, a struggle for them. So just even to have awareness and to provide that comfort and to kind of keep the daily routine of the surviving pet, because we can tend to just get so consumed with our grief, which is totally normal and totally natural, but just to remember that keeping that routine and kind of some normality for the surviving pet can really, really help the pet, navigate the challenging time that they're experiencing as well. And just lots of comfort and cuddles and just, that's my advice. But if you're worried about behaviour, definitely speak to a professional on that then. And with regards supporting children, I will just say the best policy is honesty. And we often want to protect and shield our kids from the painful truth. But, and it's not, I'm not going to say that it's a bad thing to do, because everybody is unique and everyone has a choice of how they explain things to their children. But I just think being honest and saying our pets, our pet's life has ended, like they've died now. And if do you have any questions about that, and just being really honest. And sometimes if you say the pet has gone to sleep, maybe that child is constantly waiting for the pet to come back from somewhere and wake up and come back home, and there can be a lot of confusion at whatever age the child is. So just honesty is the best policy. And weeks and months later, checking in with that child and asking them, how are you feeling now about the death of our pet, and have you been missing them, and just checking in and just being honest, leaving the line of communication open, so that the child learns from a young age that speaking about loss and grief is a good thing, and it's not going to be shoved under the carpet, that I don't have to swallow and push it down and copy what my parents do. If grief and loss is spoken about openly within a household, that will help massively at how a child will navigate and process grief as they go throughout their life, even when they lose their grandparent, or when they go through, breakups, friendship, romantic breakups when they're teenagers and so on. That's imperative. So I hope that answers that question, but that would be my advice. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the topic of getting a new pet after experiencing loss. Some people want to rush into it. Some people have a lot of hesitancy, even quite a bit afterwards. How should we approach this decision?
Approach it at a very compassionate level. I think that's what's really important here. And, you know, a lot of people will have different opinions. And I suppose from where I'm coming from, I don't believe that the term replacing the pet is helpful to do. But people are so individual, and if people want to bring a new pet into their life quite quickly and they feel they're ready and they have done their grieving and they feel in a positive space and they've had lots of support around them where they could grieve in a really healthy way, then fantastic. But if a lot of the time people have just kind of pushed it down and say, well, if I just bring another pet in to my life, they'll just replace all the love that I've lost. And then unfortunately what sometimes happens is they end up kind of comparing the new pet to the pet that has died, and that can be very painful for people because it can resurface the grief, or it can bring the grief to the surface that had never got the chance to be felt in the first place. And then, like, it gets very complicated because once you adopt a pet or bring a new pet into your life, that's it, you know, and it's a huge responsibility. And then if you're feeling all of these feelings that I can't get the same connection, the same bond, and there's regret there, and there's just lots of feelings of confliction, it can be really difficult to navigate. So, and I'm not going to use give it time. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say that making sure that you feel that you've processed the loss in your space of time before. And if you never bring another pet into your life, that's okay as well. That doesn't mean that you're never healed from the loss experience. That's not what that means. That's just a choice that somebody makes. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure it refers to all pets really, but because I spend most of my life talking all about dogs, you know, I always say what keeps coming up with so many dog professionals out there is to set yourself up for success. So like, if you think about it, can I go into this new relationship with, be it a puppy or a parrot or whatever it is, and, you know, give them everything, you know, really help them settle in, go through all the steps, all of, you know, anyone that's had the joy of having a puppy will know that there's literally teething problems, literally and metaphorically. There'll be chewed up trainers, there'll be bitten furniture, there'll be
challenges. Yeah, a lot of challenges
all the way along. So I mean, if you're starting off on the right foot, you have the opportunity to start a great relationship and to giggle through the difficult times. But I mean, if you're already dealing with quite a lot of emotional baggage and coming into that relationship with so much already that you kind of need to work through, then it's going to be maybe quite a lot.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's going to be really challenging. It's just checking in with yourself and not just doing the knee-jerk reaction of, I'm just going to go out and get a new pet and that'll make me feel better and everything will be fine. And it's that knee-jerk. And other people will tell us that, go out and get a new pet and like, you know, everything, you know, you'll feel better. And I mean, we don't replace humans when they die. You know, we can't go out and get a new, you know, whoever was in our life, but it should be treated the same. That's what I'm getting at here. And I think that yeah.
And I suppose to sum things up a bit, what advice would you give to someone that feels that they either shouldn't be grieving so much for a pet, or that feels that they're really not coping very well?
Definitely is to just give yourself some time to sit with yourself and ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need? And a lot of the time we don't think about ourselves. We're too busy thinking of others, trying to keep the house going, work, everything. And what do I need? And And just acknowledging that I'm not coping. What do I need from this situation? Whether that's connecting with others that have been through something similar, whether that's seeking professional support, whether that's joining a Facebook group and that kind of thing, whether that's getting a journal out and just writing everything down and maybe just managing to do that a couple of times a week. I mean, it's so different for everybody, but it's just to check in with yourself, check in with your body. What do I need? And to have that awareness of how has the loss of my pet made me feel? And why am I not coping? Why am I struggling? And do I need support with this? And it's so okay to need support and to seek the support. It's okay to do that. Because pet loss grief is real, it's valid, it's so important. It needs to be spoken about, it needs to be felt. We have these incredible bonds with the most incredible animals in our lives, and what an honour it would be to gift ourselves the time to feel all of the pain, the emotions, the joy, everything that relationship brought us. What a gift it would give to give that to ourselves, to help us to feel better. So yeah, I think that's really an important message that I would love to leave with people.
Definitely. And it's like, just a huge thank you from my side just for coming on and being so vulnerable and sharing about such a difficult topic. I mean, it's complicated, it's complex. There's so many feelings, they're all valid. I feel like I've been on a roller coaster in the best way possible. From nearly crying to laughing so much, and I think all emotions around these feelings are totally valid. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking all about this with you, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
I've enjoyed every minute, Killian. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a million. Looking forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. And another huge thank you to Louise for joining us on the podcast this week and sharing such valuable information. If you'd like to find out more about Louise's work and her upcoming workshops, as well as some free resources that she has on her website and social media pages, you can find all of that information detailed in our show notes. You can also find out more about Ruby Reese on our social pages, as well as at ruby-reese.com. If this has been your first episode, maybe you'd like to go back and listen to other episodes of the podcast. And we would also love if you would follow or subscribe us, and look forward to seeing you join future episodes that we put out every single Tuesday. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday.